Morning, everyone. It is Marla Copal, the Vitality Mentor, and I'm here today with a new schedule. So, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'll be talking about how we develop resiliency. It is a skill and it is acquired. And what better time than now when everybody's lives are disrupted or feeling disrupted, and maybe you've gotten control over what you can handle right now. But the opportunity is so great to take this resiliency out and rework relationships that we've had in the past that we didn't think were working, or to rebuild alliances with those that we kind of gave up on because they just didn't seem to ever be easy to communicate with. So, whatever it is, resiliency has a lot of factors, but one of them is self awareness. And so I want to talk about just self-awareness about that which irritates you. And people can irritate you, situations can irritate you, just the inconsistencies of life can irritate you. And actually, the way we start to develop resiliency is to start understanding our little checklist of things that trigger us. So I'm just going to talk in simple stories here, so maybe you can get some awareness. So when I was growing up, and I may have told this story before, I hope not, but I was about 10, and my younger brothers just loved to tease me, and I would just go off, and I'd be upset. Finally, one day, my mother looked at me, and she just looked me straight in the eye, and she said, Marla, she said, every time you react, they win. Wow, that was all I needed. I like to win. And so it was really hard because they continued to tease. But what she also shared was if you can just stop reacting for 1 or 2 weeks, they'll stop. And of course, I'm 71, so how am I going to remember at 10? But I do know that every time they started teasing me after that, I made a conscious choice to not react to them, to not give them what they wanted. And by the end of about 7 days, I think I was able to just grin at them. Like, I got your number, brothers, and you're not going to trip my trigger. And it was probably a couple, 3 weeks maybe before it got comfortable to just ignore them. Now, ignoring is a resiliency skill. Now, I'm not saying ignore those things we need to pay attention to sometimes in a time of an emergency. I'm not saying ignore a decision that's critical for a life choice. But I'm saying those emotional triggers that you have, now's a great time since we're all captured at home with multiple people that maybe we're used to going to work and we only see for a few hours and now we're like cocooned together. And how do you want to develop resiliency? I so appreciate the families that are taking time to create together, to make masks and to do some of the things, or to do something for their neighbors, or to craft the drive-by birthday parties for 90-year-olds. I mean, it is so heartwarming to see all of this stuff that's out there. But we can't always have an event to create that opportunity for us to show our graciousness and our gratitude and our grown-upness. So my suggestion to you is if you really have ever thought resiliency would be a skill you'd like to develop, is to start taking an assessment of those things that trigger you. And then start looking at how many people you've discounted as associates, as friends, as business partners, as employees, whomever it might be, and just said they're a jerk. And how many jerks do you have that each have the same thing that triggers you? Well, that's a good percentage of people you're probably leaving out of your life. And do they have other value for you? Are they an information resource? Are they a business resource? Are they a networking connector for you? I don't know. So before you discount somebody's behavior because it triggers you, go back and look at how many people demonstrate that behavior, and then ask yourself, how can I adjust my trigger? So let me give you another example. Years ago, I got to work for someone who I adored, and she was a keynote speaker, and I helped publish her book. And but she taught something called Savvy, and her name is Billy Lee. And sometimes she pointed out that if you're getting picked on, then maybe that's because people are afraid of you. Maybe they're intimidated by you. So maybe what you really need to do is to sit back and assess, do I want this relationship? What about me intimidates them? Now, if you like to play that position of being intimidating, go ahead. There is one day that that bank account will run out, and that is not a resilient place to be. Because if you aren't demonstrating flexibility, you're not demonstrating resiliency. And so I look at sometimes the relationships that I had to have with people when I was running my property management business, and I had contracts with a lot of people. Different, banks to individual owners of one unit, to people who transferred overseas and I managed their homes, to investor builder groups that had built multiple apartment complexes. And each time it was different. And then sometimes there were other business owners, and we talk about the things that Joe Biden is doing today, and people are still coming back with all of their sexual harassment issues. I had to weather that storm myself, but I never took it personally. I almost took it as it was a habit of theirs to see how far they could get until they got no. So I'll give you a simple example of resiliency, at least from my perspective. I had a client who's probably 25 years my senior, and he just loved to speak in innuendo all the time when I'm in there discussing his business, his accounts, and everything else. And he was like trying to ask me out to dinner, but he couldn't. And he's really a nice guy. And you could just see him kind of bumbling. I kind of was amused by it, but it took us off track too often. So what I said one day, as I said, Bill, so we have a choice here. And so I wasn't intimidated to keep his business, even though it was substantial. I wasn't intimidated to keep his business. It was like, look, this is crazy. Every time I go in here, we spend too much time because we're fielding all these innuendos. So I finally just said, Bill, look, I'm here to do business. I understand everything else you're telling me, sending me as a message, and etc. But I really need you to understand, Bill, I am here for a business relationship, even though I wear a skirt. Can we get down to business? And in a way, I saved him face. He was fine. He was a jokester, so he took it really, really well. And he was my client until I sold my business. That was 10 years. And you know what? We had a great laugh all the time because he could kind of wink once in a while, and I knew what he was thinking, but he didn't say it anymore. So, there are ways to manage these relationships that we want to build and to have resiliency, but we have to understand what's the behavior that makes us uncomfortable from others, but how could we respond to it differently so that we can still create a working relationship? Now, there's just sometimes that, it's not worth it because the level of maturity that we need to work with someone is missing. But if you can give a hint, tease it, negotiate it, then you do that, okay? Because that's part of resiliency. It takes self-awareness, and that it takes attention to how many other times with different people or situations does this happen to me? Then the next step is to let go of things physically. So sometimes you walk out of those meetings with people and you'll find your shoulders have been hunched up, your back hurts, your head hurts. So you need to know that you've got signs and you've got signals to pay attention to. So now you have your second choice is, how do I want to handle that so that I can let go of this reaction in so I typically have a typical physical reaction. How do I let go of this physical reaction? So now you've got an awareness, and you've found two situations where, what is the trigger? How do I want to work with that trigger before I throw this person out of my life? And then how do I want to physically manage this type of issue? Once you start having those conversations with yourself, you'll find yourself walking through what I call the resiliency portal. It's like all of a sudden you won't even remember what it was like that you were there. So anytime we want to make a change and we cross the threshold, you'll never remember what was here before. You really won't. You can maybe have a little memory of a story like I do about teasing, but you know what? That teasing story from my brothers has served me well when I coach salespeople, when I coach business people, when I coach my friends. I have called off more animosity situations, or where people are just starting to rankle each other, by just telling that story, and everybody owned their behavior. And it was just fun to be around those people afterwards. But until they knew what was pushing their buttons, they didn't have resiliency. So I invite you to take this time that we still have to reflect. Now, I will see you again Wednesday at 8:30 Mountain Time for more on resiliency. And tomorrow, Thursday and Saturday, I'm starting one on resiliency in home-based businesses. And before you even step into one, how are you going to select the people that you want to work with, and the products that you want to work with, and what are the lies you're telling yourself, and what are the truths that you have to own before you step into a home-based business and expect yourself to be successful. So I want you to step into your home-based businesses and not beat yourself up further, but I want you to thrive. And so let's see. And if you have questions that you want to send, we'll do that. And I'm thinking next week of trying to figure out how to open this up into some interviews. But in the meantime, while I craft and create, have a great Monday. It's cold here in Colorado. We're all staying inside. Even though we're asked to stay inside, we're definitely staying inside. So happy Monday, everyone. Marla Copal, the Vitality Mentor. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.